One of the scariest things we can enter into in life is being a parent. And in this episode, we are going to drop into some powerful ways in which you can meet those fears and move through them so that you can be the parent that you hoped and wished and dreamt that you always were. We are going to meet Micheline Green. She is on that path to really support how the world can change in order to support parents to be more in that place and be able to bring forth a new generation. Enjoy this episode. Allow your heart to listen. Micheline Green is a strategic wisdom partner, guiding visionary women leaders from high performance to deep presence. Her work sits at that intersection of intuition, integrity, parenting, and leadership, supporting powerful women who move mountains yet long to reconnect with the sweetness, softness, and subtle rhythm of life. You're going to really enjoy the amazing and powerful tips that she brings to this episode. And I want to just bring a specific note because we talk about modeling in parenting and our influence on children. But one thing that we do not address openly and is really important with the work that I have always done since I began any form of work was working with people with different needs and different range of support from our social paradigm. And what we share in this episode does not take away from that intuition, that wisdom that is known when you know that a diagnosis is important with your child, that it will give them access to support and understanding from others that may not otherwise be afforded by our society. And so please really be mindful that the rest of this conversation sits apart from that as a specific aspect and issue of parenting that may arise for some of you. And I really want you just to embrace this conversation in terms of how challenging it is to even navigate getting diagnoses and getting support for your children for whatever it is that will help them on their path and also help you as a parent, whether those diagnoses also affect you and your perception of yourself. So please enjoy this episode and do really listen to the vibration of what is beneath her message and the content that is shared. I'm really delighted that at this point in the series, we are meeting Micheline Green. She is a beautiful women's empowerment coach. And in particular, her focus is in a very ordinary daily experience for women. But I would like to extend it obviously out to all parents because it's a key part of what many of us might choose on this path of life, which is the delight of supporting others in coming into this world and how they might grow. And so I'm really excited to hear what she has to bring for you guys to hear today. So welcome. Very lovely to have you here, Micheline.
Thank you so much, Nid. I appreciate it.
And I'd love it if you could just share a little bit about what took you into guiding people around that leadership through motherhood.
Yeah. Bit of a roundabout way, but I always believe there's a golden thread that runs through all of our lives. And even though we may feel like we're off our path or we're off our direction, everything is leading us somewhere. And I'm really, at this stage of my life, I see this more and more, that everything I've done has absolutely led me to this moment. So leadership and parenting, I would say for me personally, leadership started in high performance sports. So I played sports, truly saved my life as a young teenager, and into teen years. And then I left home at 16. And 3 years later, I was actually playing rugby for the Canadian women's rugby team. And in 1991, I kicked off the very first Women's Rugby World Cup. And
Amazing.
so that was a moment of really self-leadership in the sense that Canada's a huge country. We did not get to train together as a team. We all had to work out on our own, train ourselves on our own, raise our own money. We paid our own way back in 1991. So it was real determination and perseverance for the love of a sport. That's why we women did it. And so it taught me discipline, obviously, and perseverance and that drive to show up as the best that I could. And once we were there at the very first Women's World Cup, I mean, what an honor, what a thrill. Um, it was it was a real experience to actually, you'll so relate to this. The very first game was New Zealand against Canada. And the New Zealand women had to ask permission to be able to do the haka. So here we were as the Canadian team standing in front of the Kiwis as they began to do the haka for the first time. And, back then, just like not back then, even still, rugby for the Kiwis is just like they're just such an amazing rugby team. And we stood there as they began the haka, and we were standing in a line, and slowly our captain reached out to me and she pulled me in close. And then I reached out and I pulled the next woman in close to me. And then we grabbed each other by our shoulders and we stood like arm in arm and just kind of raised our chins a little bit more because it was so impressive and it was so powerful. And yet we started to begin to feel the courage and the connection that we had in our each of our own individual quest, but as a quest in unity as well, to show up, and be a part of this sport and for the love of sport. So that was a real this whole sporting journey for me really taught me about self-leadership, about how to lead a group towards a common goal, how to motivate one another, how to encourage one another, um, and how to show up as your best, and I know that, obviously competition is a part of this, but it's not competition as in a power over. It's not as in like, I'm going to squash you. It's not the same way as women's sport is. It's more like, I'm going to bring my best, so you better show up because I'm going to pull out the best in you. And
And I
that's a
really love,
message that truly stuck with me from
I
sport.
know that is really important message because there is that tendency, right, that
Mm-hmm.
we think competition is being better than superior and kind of it keeps that
Mm-hmm.
separation. And I love that key in you feeling the strength. And I know what it's like when you stand in front of a hacker and that's just the power of it is immense,
Mm-hmm.
but also that you all naturally felt the power that you held as a
Mm-hmm.
group, right? And that
Yeah.
unity. And so it's really wonderful to hear that importance of being connected with one another, with everyone's strengths being at the forefront, at the peak, but none of that takes away from anyone else, right? It's all how actually we up level one another is by seeing
Mm-hmm.
the the strengths, the gifts that others have, and really letting them bring that to the fore. And then you can bring yours, and then someone else can bring theirs. And so, actually, that's that uplift feeling energy. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
that's such a powerful message and to hear that
Mm-hmm.
coming through women's sports as well, what a healing that is for women
Yeah.
coming together and working together.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so to continue with kind of my journey, so that was, somebody I left home at 16, so there's a lot of drive and perseverance and survivalism,
Mm,
within me and raising to the top of my sport. But then, years later, I'm a child protection investigator, I'm a social worker, I'm working in child protection. and then got married, had my own kids, and did not want to go back to child protection. So had a master's in counseling and became a school counselor.
Mm.
And there was something in the parents that I was seeing and the teachers as I was working in the school, that there was teachers would be bringing me their students, and it would be just like, like, take the student, this exhausted, I don't know what else to do, please fix him or her. And so what I recognized after seeing the same teacher returning with the same student again and again, it was like I started seeing this pattern and going, hang on, it's not the student, it's not the teacher, it's something that's happening between them. And this is where I started to make it's the connection in them. There's something in this relationship that is not allowing them to be in right relationship. And now, of course, that's not the child's responsibility. This is the adult's responsibility. But at this time, I was a mother of 3 kids. And even though as a school counselor, I could handle all of the kids who acted out before I'd even left the school parking lot, I was screaming at my own kids, And so I could see that I didn't have the skills to help teachers back then, even though I could see that's what they was needed. It was the adults who needed the
Mm.
help. And so I made the transition out of working with children individually and started working with the adults as I began to ask the questions, how do we as individuals create change, or how do we as organizations create change? Because I kept seeing this pattern in the school system of teachers and adults blaming kids and their behaviors. And I'm like, hang on, these are kids, So that was where I really started diving in, working with parents, working with teachers, and supporting them to understand the inner life of their child. 25, 30 years ago, we didn't really talk about an inner life.
Mm.
But yet I had some childhood trauma. And so it was my inner life that was so chaotic that had me acting out in ways trying to ask for help because I didn't have the words or the language how to ask for help. So my behavior was an ask cry for help. And parents, adults around me couldn't see what I needed. Therefore, leaving home at 16 and being on my own and independent and all of that sort of stuff. So I've always had this ability to sit with children, to listen, and to be able to deeply relate to their inner life and to understand that. And so what I started doing is helping adults and parents connect with the inner life of the child. However, you can't do that until you've connected to your own inner life, your own interiority, your own understanding of what is going on inside of you. And so this is where now you can kind of see this weaving of leadership and parenting. And this is where I am here today to say that motherhood really is the oldest and wisest leadership on this planet. And our future depends on it. So this is
Mm.
saying that really, mothers have been leading us since the beginning of time. And if leaders today could take up some of that resilience and empathy and relational intelligence that mothers bring, we would have leadership really transform in organization and in business as well. So I'm really taking a stand now for just saying, like, how can we support mothers to step more deeply into their own conscious relationship with themselves, but then also supporting their children? And how can we support them to step into leadership in a new way within their careers as well?
It's a really
Mm,
powerful message, and makes so much sense, right?
mm,
Because what jumps out to me within even your own story is the demonstration that children's behavior, they learn from the modeled behavior of grown-ups around them, of what we're doing, and not even necessarily saying. So much is the non-verbal
mhm.
aspects of what are going on around. And yes, they have their own interpretation, but
Yeah,
they're such a good reflection of actually the state of us as people.
yeah.
And so if children are having issues, there's a sign that the adults need to stop and have a look at themselves in order to be able to model different behavior to the children. And it reminds me, we had a guest on from the yogic tradition who talked about the importance of satsang, being surrounded by good examples that we can be inspired to become. And that's what a good mother does, right? Is she sets the example of remembering to take care of all of the children and everyone in the group, and that, everyone had their turn with the toy, even if it doesn't feel like it when you're the child, never had enough time. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, not as a parent, I would love it if you could share a little bit more about what you see as being the kind of the scariest part of being a parent that you see most commonly, that can be the kind of tripwire of
Mm-hmm.
how a child then, doesn't get modeled to the right behavior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll answer that, and I just want to step back a moment from what you just said, because it's true that the children model the behaviors around ourselves, and I also just want to be a little careful with our choice of words, in the sense, because every time I'm working with parents and working with mothers in particularly, I want to recognize the tenderness of this relationship with their children. And never, ever do I question the love that a mother has for their child. And I think we can all admit, as a mom of three kids, and all the moms I've worked with, we don't always act in loving ways. And that's a hard thing to admit. We can be the scary one in the room. We can raise our voice and provide sharpness to our children. And yes, we want to change our behaviors, but it's really, we don't understand why. Sometimes I don't want to yell. I don't want to scream, but oh my God, it's 8:30 in the morning and I'm losing my shit again. And I use that word very specifically because shit I use as an acronym are my stress, my habits, my irritations, and my triggers. And these are all unconscious to us. So the scariest part is, well, I mean, just becoming a mom is scary. I would like to say I'm officially a grandmother. My son just had a baby 3 days ago. So I'm a brand new grandma, and I've been talking to his wife, and, young and having a baby, and I'm afraid of giving birth. I'm afraid, will he feed? Will he latch on? Like every single step along the way, there's some kind of fear in, am I going to be good enough? Am I going to be able to do this? And that is a tremendous responsibility. We're just kind of handed this little infant, and it's like, bye-bye, And it's like, oh my gosh, it's such a huge responsibility. So I think fear is just embedded into motherhood, especially then multiplied in our culture, because everything about our culture and the inundation of the cultural collective is fear, 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 fear. You don't know, the doctor knows, or this influencer knows, or this person knows, or this person knows. And over the years, probably from my grandmother, so my grandmother was born at the turn of the century, 1900s. And so to my mother, to me, and now to my children. So that's in 4 generations. We have stripped the mother of her own internal wisdom and knowing, and we've taken away the village that supports her. The aunties, the grandmothers, all of that support. Now, we women know how to reach out, and we definitely have relationships, but we don't have the time for those relations. We don't have the nourishment in those relationships, and we don't always trust those relationships. And they're also often filled with a lot of advice giving. And it's not about advice giving, it's about watching others do it. It's the modeling. So, as I start to work with mothers, and my particular women that I work with are high performing women like myself, pushing, driven, survivalists, have made it far in a male dominated culture, in a male dominated world, either in the boardroom or in the C suites, or whatever it is. They have made it in their career. and extremely successful. And yet, bedtime can have them
Mm.
wondering, do I even have the skills to do this? How do I know how to do this? And part of the fear that I think a lot of mothers feel is that I don't know how to do this. I can't do this. And human nature is when we can't see within ourselves the work we need to do, we project it outward, right? Projection is a very common phrase that we use. And this is where we can project onto our kids. And I remember going through this in a period in my life when my son hit 4. He was my first. And I was like, does he have psychological problems? Like, is there something wrong with him? Because he's a 4-year-old. His behaviors were all over the place. And I was like, I don't know, I don't know what to do. So I questioned that in him. But the work is, how do we start returning to ourselves? And this is now, again, there's a fear like, do I have what's capable? Or especially for the women that I work with, like they come from survivalism and trauma, and their own parents weren't present, or their parents were narcissists, or whatever the parental programming that they come from, to be able to turn around and look at that again, it can bring up some fear. And the work that I do is extremely, it's like softening. It's just a series of softenings. I often say that when clients come and sit with me, they are going to feel the unconditional love that maybe they didn't receive from
Mm.
their own parents, so that they can see and feel and experience what it is like to be able to look within themselves, to get to know their own interiority, their emotional health, their spiritual health, their interpersonal health. Like there's a lot of complexity to a human being, but then being able to then take what they've learned and then back out so that they have the skills to model for their own children.
And so, in that process of someone learning to drop in, so much the common, especially in the early days of being a parent, and once you add into and you get to 3, and I know I have 4 stepsisters, and 4 is definitely the magic number where a clan is formed and they take care of themselves and they become a very
Mhm,
self-sufficient
mhm,
unit. Under that, it's a lot
mhm,
of strain on a parent,
mhm,
because they're still like 3 individual units, and so there is definitely a numbers piece with children, and especially when they're close or not close in age, but there's that overwhelm factor of kind of
mhm,
lack of sleep. They need this food, that bag needs to be ready, that thing's got to happen, when are we going to that activity? Oh no, they're crying now. Oh no, now they've, now, oh no, are they going to be sick? There's all this kind of up and down, um
mhm,
not really knowing where you are. And so in that
mhm,
chaos, as I think it often feels
mhm,
like, and that lack of
mhm,
control, what
mhm,
is a simple way that you help them start to come back to that exact thing, which is to
mhm,
stop and be in that moment where the fears might rise?
mhm, mhm. Well, this is this. So the book that I have coming out is called Leadership Parenting: How to Soften Control to Strengthen Connection.
Mm.
So, what actually happens in those moments where there is overwhelm, or there is chaos, or there is a lot of vigilance, right? So, our female brains are made to have thoughts going in all of these directions because we have children to pay attention to and to anticipate. We have anticipatory brains. And so, when that chaos and overwhelm tends to rise, what with the clients that I work with, what tends to happen is an overexertion of control. So now they're trying to manage everything, trying to manage schedules, trying to manage their husbands or their partners. They're trying to manage all of the kids' schedules. They're trying to be in control because ultimately there's an identity that we hold as mothers, is like, I want to be seen as a good mother. And so this is how I know how to do it, is I will be in control of everything. And so it's actually not about coming back to control. It's about releasing that tight grip of control And that's hard to do because that's where we have sourced our safety from. So pre-kids, like my own story, leaving home at 16, obviously I had a lot of vigilance. I was on top of things. I was managing, I was persevering, I was pushing, I was performing, I was getting ahead. Those skills don't translate to raising children. They require something completely different from us. And a lot of those skills that I'm talking to have a very penetrative, agentic, masculine energy type. That, again, we women, Gen X. Not sure where you fit. I'm not sure where your audience fits. Obviously, these women I'm talking about who are having children now are more like in the millennials or Gen Z,
Yeah.
but there's still this agentic masculine energy that we women have taken up and have become successful with it, extremely successful. But at what cost? And that's the question that we have to hold ourselves. There's a cost to that because if we look at that, those maybe what our children need is that tenderness and softness and deeper connection and greater presence. And, those are qualities that have been deemed weak, right? And so the return in those moments is not to giving up all control, right? We don't go from one swing to another, but it's just releasing that grip of control to be able to come back to your own interior, to be able to source your safety from within inside of yourself. So that might sound a bit like an oxymoron to people because a lot of people think, well, it's the environment that gives me safety.
Mhm.
And actually, it's deeply within ourselves, in our own wisdom. And this is where you mentioned a woman's empowerment coach. My title I go by is actually a strategic wisdom partner. It's returning to your own wisdom. And so that we can source that safety from within inside of ourselves. Because once we as a parent feel calm, feel composed, and can feel safe, no matter what behavior our child brings, we're going to hold the container of safety, therefore modeling how to source safety from within, which is what we would want from our child, for our child,
Mm.
is for them to know how to model and hold that safety and calm and composure from within.
That's
So yeah, go right ahead. I could talk and
Yeah,
talk.
no, it made
Please ask.
me it prompted me to think of like the kind of, subconscious thoughts that can be going through though, where, you want to be the safe, composed mum, right? But then, your kids are playing up, it's in public. You don't want to be the awkward, noisy, disruptive family in the
Mm-hmm.
space. And so, that's where some of that sharper
Yeah,
tone might come through because
yeah,
the safety piece can feel like
yeah,
not looking like the embarrassing, noisy person.
yeah.
Wherever that belief comes from to not be the embarrassing person. So I guess that for me is like, okay, so then I don't know in that moment how to feel safe because I'm conflicted. My safety is not being the embarrassing, noisy parent, but how can I get my child to calm down and be quiet, and they
Mm-hmm.
might not
Mm-hmm.
want to calm down for a good
Yeah,
reason, right?
yeah, yeah.
um and find that inner safety within.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a few things that you said in there that I usually can pick up on when I'm talking with parents. And that phrase, how do I get my child to? So this is such a common phrase, like, just tell me how I get them to eat broccoli, and just tell me how I can get them to go to bed, and just tell me how I can get them. And so this is where it comes back to one of the main messages I want parents to know is you have no control over another human being. And that is a really hard pill to swallow because of course we can pick up our toddler and put them in a timeout. Of course we can overpower a 4-year-old and take them away from the toys. We can do all of that. And sometimes when safety is in order, that's very needed. But what we're trying to teach children, now I'll step back for just a second here because I'll just share a little bit of the methodology, the framework that I hold. Our culture, our world is filled with three common kind of the waters that we swim in: fear, lack, and separation. Fear of everything, lack that I have the skills, the money, the time, the resources, blah, 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 and separation. I'm all on my own and I'm up against the world, against myself, so I have to grip and control. And so I was wondering, what happens if we could raise children with the three underlying beliefs of love, abundance, and unity? And so this is at the core of my leadership parenting methodology. I bring in the body, of course, because somatic awareness and embodiment is where our wisdom lives. You know, we've all been trained to over-identify with the mind. We're all recognizing the body has to come back online and really trust in the messages and the wisdom that our bodies hold. That's where our mother's wisdom lives, you know, deep to the ground of Mother Earth. It comes through the body. And so how do we raise our children in love and abundance and unity? And so I break this down to connection with the belly, connection to the heart, and connection to the mind. The belly, what I discovered, is where love exists. I thought it was going to be the heart. And then through my years of study and working with parents, it was like, actually, it begins in the belly, in the grounding system, in the perineum, that root chakra. That is our safety and our security, which is so deeply connected to Mother Earth. And that is where we find our composure, our safety, our calm, right? And it's also where we can source our boundaries from. So any relationship we're in, whether it's with our children or whether it's one another or whether it's an intimate partnership, if I'm not composed and I don't have boundaries, I'm most likely going to hurt you. Because I'm going to yell and scream and fly off the handle, or I'm going to blame you, or I'm going to let you overtake me if I don't have boundaries, or I'm going to throw it gets all messy and codependent without boundaries, right? So that's where love in action begins. It's in the Waldorf schools. I worked as a Waldorf school counselor. It's the will force. It's in love as in action. How do we be love in action? So it starts in the belly. Moving up to the heart space, that is where abundance lives. And how does abundance live within the heart space? It's the generosity that we can provide for our children to move through their emotional waves. Because we were taught, many of us, if not all of us, to shut those emotions down, clamp those up, quit your crying, all of these things that we were taught as children. So now as adults, when we have our own children, we don't know how to deal with emotions. We didn't have it modeled for us. So how do we open to the generosity of the heart to be able to allow our children to move through the emotional waves? And then we come up to the mind. And the mind is like the sky. How are we able to now really, truly help problem solve and teach the skills that our children need? So this is an infrastructure an interior infrastructure that really comes from the set level of integrity, right? That feeling of integrity. And don't we want the most integrous leaders right now? It's really hard to look out into the world to find leaders who have got this integrity, this strong center pole that they're not going to get blown around or paid out or, ethically whatever, right? So this is where I started creating this leadership parenting. So it's whether it's in parenting or in leadership or in both, and especially with the mothers that I work with, this is not about more control. It's about coming back home to yourself. It's about coming back into deeper presence and connecting with that deeper wisdom. And my gosh, what if we women who are leading in this world had this strength of this integrity pole holding us securely while at the same time our hearts wide open, right? So
Yeah,
that's what I envision.
that's a really beautiful, even just for someone to walk through those 3 points in one
Mm-hmm.
of those moments, just
Mm-hmm.
to connect to the earth and feel that connection from the belly to the earth and be like,
Mm-hmm.
I have all that I need and it can
Yeah.
be here within me, and I can know it. And then I can be
Mm-hmm.
present with the chaos of these emotions. Right.
Yeah.
And I can still
Yeah.
look around and I can know, I can apologize to that person. I can,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I can navigate us over to a certain corner or whatever, so there's an integrity in holding and upholding the situation, but also, whatever there is in terms of the whole situation.
Yeah.
And as you said,
Yeah.
that gift of women, because there's the watching how many children are where, we're always scanning for
Mm-hmm.
impact on others and ensuring
Mm-hmm.
that there's balance and fairness. And that
Mm-hmm.
also brings me back to what you were saying earlier on around the connection and the unity from your sports, and how has, there's obviously the connection with your child and being really present with your child as a parent, but the the piece that you'd mentioned around, we don't have the connection of community around us that
Mm-hmm.
helps model and inform us and give us the support,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
where, you know, we might get an idea of what to do in
Yeah.
certain situation or who to turn to. How does that naturally feed through? Because obviously you know what it is to be, and you spoke so beautifully at the beginning around uh, the unity of not being in competition but in competition,
Mm-hmm.
and how also you've also said, our society isn't structured, we're very much on our own, it's very much the belief you've got to be on your own, and that's not what
Mm-hmm.
motherhood has ever been
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
traditionally. And so, poor mums are in a very false paradigm of overburdened. Too
Mm-hmm.
much is being
Mm-hmm.
placed on them currently in our society, because that's not the
Yeah.
community that we're used to being a part of. So I'd be really
Yeah.
grateful if you could just give us a bit of an idea of how you guide people with that sense of support and community.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for that question. I see there's three, when we're in those moments, the mothers we're in the grocery store, 2-year-olds breaking down, and you've got all of these things. You have the stimulus, which is your child's behavior, and you have your reaction. And, we think stimulus response, right? Like it just happens so quickly. And what I tend to do is with the work is we have to pull that moment apart. We have to just stretch that split second that it happens apart. Because when you get in there, I can walk clients through. There's like 6 or 7 things that are happening within the multiple systems within you in that split second. And when we can pull that time apart and start looking at what are the habitual ways of reacting in those moments, and what are the underlying beliefs that are working there? What are the underlying behaviors? All of this, it's like I call it, it's like a ball of yarn, and we kind of have to untangle it. So that's the part of the work that I do with my clients, while at the same time, we're building the skills of the new way of being. So building those moments of new skills, new abilities, and new ways of beliefs. Because again, I think so many of us believe and know we need more support, but we don't know how. So there's three things that are at play. There's our own parental programming. So our parents programmed us the way that they were parented us. We have cultural conditioning, so there is a cultural belief, right? And then we have societal structures. I interviewed a lot of women for this book, a lot of women who are in positions of leadership who are also parenting. And one of the number one things they said was societal systems and structures don't support women, right? It doesn't matter, it's 5 o'clock and they're asking everybody to stay till 7. And meanwhile, the women are going, I've got 3 kids and 2 soccer practices to get to, right? And so the societal structures are not set up for that. And so again, more that we women step into this depth of our wisdom and our power and our presence through both as leadership as mother and in the workplace, this is where we get to change systems. This is where we get to start putting it into place where there is the support that women need. Now, the work that I do with clients, I work obviously one-on-one. I am a partner. I am a true partner. I am with you 100% of the way, and I do this deeper work with you. But then I also have a group called Be All In. And I don't, it's not a mastermind. It's not a course. It's not an experiment. It is an initiation. And why I call it an initiation, because I think that a lot of women were reaching this. I'm sure you have this with your own clients. There's just a knowing that there's something more for me.
Mm.
There's just a sense that I have to do things differently. I'm just ready for my next, I hate the word level, but the next level of my leadership, the next level of my mothering. There's something more here for me. And so when women feel that sense within them, they enter into this initiation process with me, which is a 12-month program. And it's a group of 12 women. And we work together. It's a group coaching call every single week. There's trainings, there's a library, there's office hours, there's teachings, and then there's group coaching. So it's in the messiness of your life because these women hold so much. They're carrying so much of the energetic load and the emotional load, not just of their families, of the spouses, their workplaces, their friends. It's just too much. It's just too much. And so slowly we do this reorganization interiorly so that we can let go of all that we're trying to carry and we can just come home to ourselves in that inner infrastructure that I talked about earlier. So this is the work that I do
Yeah.
privately and in groups.
And as you say that, it makes me think of what I see in my clients, at least, is that the more inner work they do, the more that they can connect with that presence and find that wisdom within themselves, the easier it is to find the community, the easier it is to build those genuine connections and to open yourself to receive support, because so much of that lack culture is I have to do it all myself. And when you have to do it all yourself, there's no space to receive. And so there's and you're so busy being so generous, not just of emotions, but of your own time, that so many women can't enter into really genuinely receiving the support that also is not necessarily what our mind thinks, but is, that deep wisdom of actually, this is where you need support. It's not where we think we're going to get a solution quite a lot of the time. We're like chasing down the road. Oh, if I can just get a day of childcare, the following thing will happen. And actually, it's not the childcare of one day that's really the shift maybe that's actually needed, but it's a different type of support. And what I see, and it sounds as though your container does a similar thing, is it's the inner work opens up the capacity for that support and those needs to be met in a way that is much more generous than we would ever think in our own mind, especially because the mind is so much made up of our past and all of that conditioning. Most of the thoughts, if you sit down and go, I'm going to think out a solution, is like not helpful thoughts. Not a great solution. It might be okay, but it's not really going to transform your life, right? And give you more of those beautiful connective present moments with your children. And that's what I see. And then people naturally, their communities, amazes me how different clients discover their communities and find the support as they grow. And it's so different and it varies so much. And I can see, there's obviously stages as people find those communities, and online is amazing for that. Because it gives us a breadth of discovering people. But that to me is a key part of, sounds like, of what you're doing is really helping people build that inner resource. And then like the magnetism piece, right? You are now in a place where it's easy for you to receive. Right, rather than like I need and feeling like a lost rat.
And then I would just add, and then the next evolution after that, after you found community and able to receive, it's the natural order of wanting to serve. How do I serve humanity? How do I give back? How do I help others? And not from a drained, exhaustive place, but from a truly filled, generous space. That's the natural
way. And also, I wanted just to ask you specifically with regards to the journey of parenting. Obviously, different people have a desire to return to work at different speeds. And what that might look like, and whether or not it changes your career, and there's a lot that can change in any parent in that discovery of what parenting brings out in you and that inner journey.
Yeah.
And obviously with that different timing that different people have of returning to the service, that service could be a period of time just being a parent, right? That
Oh, for
could
sure.
be. So I just wanted to touch on, if you wouldn't mind, the that draw out to purpose and service, because I think culturally, we have the purpose. The paradigm is definitely shifting, but there's still a lot of people who have that drive that your job is your purpose, that how you make money is your purpose. And I just love it if you could touch a little bit on that service purpose shift that might happen for some parents.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people do feel that their job is their purpose if they're happy within their job, and they enjoy their work. That can give a lot of purpose to somebody. What I'm seeing amongst the women that I work with is now they are wanting within their organization to create change within the organization. How do we bring more humanity into the workplace? How do we shift the systems of how mothers are being supported? Or how do we bring more courageous conversations to the workplace? So it is about shifting and serving people within business or within organization. And then I work with a lot of women who are like, I am so done with the corporate world. I'm building my own business. And I've worked a lot with entrepreneurs who are now ready to start their own podcasts or, provide marketing services or whatever it is that they're deeply passionate about out into the world. And what I also notice is that this, the habits of corporate life often end up coming with them
Mm.
into entrepreneurship. So it's still a grind and a hustle and a this and a that. And the kind of question is, well, wait a second, didn't you want to leave corporate life behind? So how do we make those shifts, right? To ease up on the drive and the push and to release that control a bit and to be more of that co-creator with life as opposed to it's all on me and I've got to drive through. So I think there's two areas there that I'm seeing.
Mm.
And parenting can throw you for a loop. I mean, my goodness, I was just talking to a client the other day and mother of four boys, and her second son is 13 and refuses to go to school. Now, this is so common right now. And what I can offer is this completely different perspective because mom is like, well, he's got to go to school. He has to go to school. We can't. And it's kind of like, well, wait a second. Aren't you and I working on how you got caught up in conformity? Let's look at that because you're kind of, I mean, I'm not saying it exactly like this to her, but it's like here she is working with me about how she got caught in this conformity trap. And now she's pushing on her son. And I'm like, what a gift your son is giving you because he's refusing to conform. And you're waking up at 40 saying, I don't want to conform anymore. So now you're in this new exploratory discovery process with him and for your family about what's to discover if we don't conform to it. You have to go to school, you have to get a career, you have to, right? Because I think a lot of children are really pushing up against this traditional school system because it's not working for them.
No, and like you say, it's the systems need to change. And I mean, I know I have plenty of clients who are teachers in different countries, and they all say same thing around school systems not working. And if the children are recognizing that, and children are still very aligned with their integrity. So, children will act on that. And so, it's an interesting time, I think, in terms of those changes of systems, as you say, and that comes from parents supporting their children as much as the children, putting their foot down, and teachers as well. So, it comes from everyone standing in their integrity and speaking, their part, that different aspect of self-leadership within their organizations for the role that they do. And that brings me back to that unity piece you were saying at the beginning about sports, and it's not a competition that anyone does better in the school or that anyone fixes it, but it's that everyone's stepping up saying, I see this part isn't working from the teachers, I see this isn't working from the kids, I see this isn't working from the parents, and people in the states, in whatever country you're in, the governing body also see where those systems are broken, and how does that, so if everyone's stepping forwards, that's exactly what we're seeking, right? Is that community coming together with a unified shift in the system, whatever that is not yet known, but just to even start to make those small incremental steps of awareness, which is obviously how we always start to make change. So so many rich aspects in your work, and so much depth to it, Micheline. Thank you so much. I feel like we only just got a chance to scratch the surface today. But I'm really, really grateful for the ways in which you've given beautiful examples for people to hear. And I feel it goes much wider than just parenting as well. There's just, these are messages that stand even for people who are caught in the busyness of life, and have found themselves conforming and got sucked into that piece as well. So thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? You've mentioned your book, obviously, in your program. So is there anything else that you wanted to share with us before we close?
Well, yes, my book is coming out. Hopefully it'll be 6 weeks from now. I don't know. And I don't even know when this one will air, but let's say by April
same time, I think.
And it's been a long birthing process, but it's called Leadership Parenting: How to Soften Control and Strengthen Connection. It is for any parent, but it's really written for, purpose-driven women leaders who are mothering the future. And then I do have a course called Executive Parenting Process. It is a program that you can buy, and you go at your own pace. There's so much information in there. It's really the whole book, the whole method is in that course. And that's available on my website. And then I also have on my website, there is a free offering, and it's called Awakening Your Spidey Senses. And it is 15 recordings. You can listen to just the first one, and that's plenty, but it's about really reconnecting to the body and the different senses that we have. Most of us are very familiar with 5 senses. And Rudolf Steiner, the founder of anthroposophy and Waldorf schools and biodynamic farming, he describes 12 senses. And so I just took it a little further and I went to the 15 senses. So you can listen to all of those, but there's one recording for each of those. So you could actually do them for 15 days and really connect and reconnect to those senses within you, which really helps to awaken awareness, greater awareness to reality that's happening in any moment is when we open to our bodies and the wisdom that they're sharing with us.
Beautiful. That sounds like fun. I'm like, oh, what an adventure.
And if you're interested on LinkedIn, Micheline Green, on LinkedIn, I write a bunch of articles there about leadership parenting and relational intelligence and leadership maturity.
Very generous with all of those shares. And I just love to close with one final question for you, which is, what lights you up?
Love. All my work is for love. It's on behalf of love, and it's with love.
Beautiful. Thank you, Micheline. That's a really beautiful, and that's the container I can feel that you hold for people. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much.
All the links are going to be below that Micheline has mentioned. So please feel free to drop down and connect with her. And I would definitely jump into that 15 days of Spidey senses. It sounds like an adventure. Thank you so much, my love. Thank you for joining. Have a wonderful day.